I'm usually a lot more professional than this. I don't know what's going on with me today.
I think it's me because I'm such an idiot when it comes to technology. It's just rubbing off on you.
I've never been very technically minded. I was recording all my shows in studios, and then all the studios were closing down. And it was like, oh, now I got to learn how to do it all. So I taught myself GarageBand and, video editing, and it's just, bleh.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what I don't remember? I know you ended up in Boston at Emerson. Where did you actually grow up?
Well, I was born in Queens, and
Queens.
we lived there until I was about, I don't know, 6 years old or something like that. I remember like hearing downtown on the street, went playing with my Barbies outside. And then my my parents moved to Hackensack, New Jersey. And, my parents were a racially mixed couple.
Yeah.
And it was the 60s. So that was, I guess, kind of weird, like they were only shown houses in certain areas in the suburbs and things like that. So, and then I guess like the neighborhood was like, oh, there's a mixed marriage, there's a mixed couple on the block and things in the area or whatever and things like that. So there were things going on that like I was completely unaware of as a kid that I found out about consequently later. But it explained a lot, it explained
Yeah.
about like how my parents were acting and things like that. Yeah, so I went to high school in Hackensack, and it's funny that you asked this question because I have just reconnected with an old friend of mine from high school. He was one of my best friends. We had this group. We were kind of like the drama club kids.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we all loved music, and we all loved to read, and we were and we loved when we partied a lot, but we got good grades, so it was kind of like that group of people, a little bit like outcasts, and he's dying of
Oh.
cancer. Yeah, but he's like, his process is really beautiful. So um so actually I was went out with him last night. He's a he was a big exec at TikTok and Viacom. So I'm so surprised that like our paths didn't cross earlier.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like all the times I was up at MTV and never ran into him or anything like that. Um, but we've just been like processing all of this sort of like all the formative stuff. Like the music we gave each other. So there was this weird thing that happened, which was I credit him with giving me David Bowie. And me and Julie and her fiance actually went to see Nick Cave last weekend in Philly. That was like phenomenal, unbelievable show. Like if you could see this tour, you've got to go see this tour because it's really like the most fantastic thing I've ever experienced. But so what was I saying? Oh, so I said to my friend, this friend of mine from high school, you gave me Steve Bowie, like, and there would be no Nick Cave in my life if there were no David Bowie. There would be no
Yeah.
lot of things if there weren't David Bowie. And he said, well, you gave me something too. He said, you gave me the Stones. He said, remember when we went to see the Stones together? And I was like, yeah, you took me to my first Stones show in Hartford, Connecticut. And he goes, and actually, Give Me Shelter is my favorite song. And I said, shut up, because Give Me Shelter is my favorite song. And then he goes, actually, if you call me. And I said, no, it's my ringtone too.
Wow. That's sick. Oh my
So
God.
crazy. I know. So there's like, I don't know if any of you have not ever done that thing where you go back and you reconnect with like a very, very, very good friend from high school, you would be amazed at how much at that age we imprint on each other.
Yeah.
Like we get so
Was this was,
much.
was this like Hackensack High School?
Yeah, it was Hackensack High
I
School.
just wanted to say that because it sounds funny.
And I'll tell you another thing. So I put this dinner together about a month ago, maybe longer, when I found out this friend of mine reached out to me and said, like, he's got limited time left on the planet. And So I found like some people from Hackensack High School. I put this dinner together. So this friend of mine, he, like I said, he was big executive at Viacom and then TikTok. And then another friend who is an Emmy award-winning television writer, was the head writer for Conan O'Brien, was the head writer and showrunner, I think, for Blackish. And another friend who is a COO, was a COO, CFO for Big Brothers Big Sisters in New York.
Uh-huh.
And then like me, and I was like this tastemaker in the, for like a couple decades. And I just was looking around that table and I was like, damn, like Hackensack High School turns them out, right? Like, there's no joke sitting here.
I think the reason I was laughing is if I'm correct, the first time I ever heard of Hackensack was watching the Three Stooges. I think I don't know why they used to talk about Hackensack because it
And
was
then
such a funny
Billy
name.
Joel, like, who needs a house in Hackensack? Is that
Pacoima was the other one. Pacoima, California, and Hackensack, New
right?
Jersey.
That's so funny.
Now you mentioned Bowie and the Stones. Was that what you were doing in high school, listening to classic rock?
Well, in the beginning, I was, because I'm 61, so I went to high school in the 70s.
You look incredible, by the way.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
was going to say that before you said you were 61 because you look incredible. I mean, if you're listening, people, you're going to have to go to YouTube and watch the interview on YouTube because Debbie Southwood-Smith is a knockout.
Oh, thank you. Um,
We sat in the same office together too. We will talk about that.
yeah, we're going to talk about that.
So the music.
So late 70s. So yeah, of course there was the classic rock. Like, of course there was, because it was the Stones and Zeppelin and Mountain and Sabbath and all of that. Like, I grew up with
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And I was a big Kiss kid. Like, Kiss were my first concert in 1976. So it was like amazing, a year ago to go see the last show at MSG, because I was like, wow, it was heavy. It was like, this has gone so full circle for me. And I'm wearing this Degeneration shirt. I don't know if you can see it, but I think Degeneration let me sign them. Nice. Oh my God. Government issue. Oh my
I
God. So
wore this
we're
shirt for
going to
you,
talk
Deb.
about all of that.
I wore this shirt for you, and we were going to talk about Degeneration because I know you're involved with them. You discovered that were you going to say that you discovered
Yes,
them?
I signed them to EMI. And I think, and we'll talk about that later, but I think the only reason that they let me sign them was because we were all Kiss people. We were like all Kiss misfit kids, So there was that. But then also, New Wave was happening. And Hackensack is so close to New York. So, and no one ID'd you back in those days. Like, it
Right.
didn't matter, there weren't like all these rules. There weren't a lot of rules in the 70s. They let you eat the orange food, and they, so, so we would drive into CBGB's and the Mud Club and Danceteria, like all that stuff, and not know what we were going to encounter, but it was cool, because we did have like some really magical encounters. So we also started listening to like Blondie and the Ramones and B-52s, and I think the Clash came when I was in college, though. But but that stuff also filtered in.
Did you feel like when you started hearing the more new wave and punkier stuff that it was changing your ears about what you wanted to listen to?
Well, I feel like I've always had really broad ears, like
Hmm.
I have, because I
Well, you became an A&R person, so that makes sense.
yeah, and my father was this frustrated opera singer. So, and
Really?
yeah, and he played the piano, and he um, he played the piano, and he raised me on classical music. Like
Wow.
I had to take piano lessons. I would play the piano with my father. He would sing. He would play classical music in the house. He would take me to operas and things like that. So, and then my mom was kind of a show tunes person, so we would also go to like Broadway plays and things like that. So I was getting like all that different thing, and then I was like this rock and roll kid. Um, but then like Hackensack was so racially mixed, like we were also getting like disco and stuff like that, like so it was really like I grew up listening to everything, but I think it's about what you love, and what I've always loved is like crunchy guitars.
Was it like 82 that you graduated, something like that, from
I
high school?
Yeah, I graduated in 81.
81. Yeah, that was a great time for music.
Yeah.
Everything was coming from every direction in the early 80s. Um, so you went when you finished school and you're getting done, what made you choose Emerson? Was that your first choice to go to Emerson College in Boston? Why?
Yeah. Because I wanted to be around music, and so I judged a college by how good the radio station was. So,
WERS.
so WERS, right? That was why I had to go to Emerson. So I applied to a couple of other colleges in Connecticut, and I got into all of them, and I did not want to stay in New Jersey. Like that was a big thing. Like I had to get out of here. I really wanted to get like as far away from my family as I possibly could, you
Oh,
know?
I remember that feeling.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm sure a lot of people listening know that.
It's amazing that you did pick the right college because when Julie Chrysler, our mutual friend, who we both worked, well, I don't know if you guys ever worked together. I work with both of you. No, I
No,
work.
you worked with both of us.
I
That's
did.
so cool. It's so funny.
Yeah, she was before you. She was 85, I think, 86, something like that, when at Enigma,
At Enigma,
the
yeah.
restless office. Um, you picked the right school because when Julie was on, we were talking about all the people that you were in school at that time. Oh my God, they like how many of them ended up managing bands, working for labels. It must have been great for you when you got there.
Yeah, I know. And it's so funny because since Julie did your show, um, I've been listening to like I listened to Lily's, Love the Lilies, and of course I listened to Julie's. And then um,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And then I I saw Warren Zanes about 4 weeks ago because I drove up to Nyack with Julie. I invited Julie along. We decided to go on an adventure. We drove it to Nyack because he was doing a book reading, and then the three of us ended up having dinner together. And I'm just so proud of him. Like his
Yeah.
accomplishments are so incredible. And I just remember him being like this like young, like kind of wasted kid in the Del Fuegos, right, in Boston. So um, it's so cool to just see how like all the things that people are creating. It's neat.
Wow, this is going to be so much fun because I want to hear about all the bands that you went to see, and then we'll talk about ERS because you get to Boston, right, in 81, 82. Oh my God, the place is like there's a million bands, million clubs. What happened when you got there? Did you go crazy?
I went crazy. Yeah. Okay. So I got first of all, I got before we talk about that, I got to clear something up. Julie said she never got a nightclub shift. Julie was on nightclub.
Julie
Julie,
doesn't have the greatest memory.
well, I don't either. And the reason I remember is
Sorry, Julie.
for a funny reason. No, I told her. I said I'm clearing this up with Steev because Curtis put her on the air, and I remember this for some reason. Monday nights was Shred. Tuesday nights was Kurt. This is the nightclub show. It went on. It was on the air from night, every weekday night from 9 to 11. And then I also did a local band only show called Metro Wave on Sunday.
Yeah, I remember.
That was a big show. Like we always had we always had artists come up every week and play live in the studio. WRS was fantastic.
Oh, I know. I was at 91.3 in Framingham State. in 81 to 83, and you could hear us until we got to about Newton, and then all of a sudden ERS completely drowned us out. But you
Well,
guys were way
yeah,
bigger.
our transmitter was on top of the Prudential.
Yeah.
So we had this huge range.
Please finish that schedule. That sounded like it was going to be great.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Monday night was Shred. Tuesday night was Curtis. Wednesday night was Julie. Thursday night was me. And I do not remember who was on Friday nights. I'm so sorry. I just don't remember. But Curtis will probably remember. So we kind of have to ask him. And
Wow, that is amazing. Because Curtis and I became really good. We've been friends. He's one of the sponsors of this podcast. We've been friends for years.
Yeah.
And I worked with you and Julie and all of you three together. When I think about all the bands, oh my God, you guys like had a lot to do with 80s rock and roll, like not just 80s, Queens of the Stone Age. I mean, we're going to talk about so many things that you guys did, the three of you. So Julie had a show and she didn't remember. That's funny.
Yeah, and the reason I have to bring it up was not only did she remember, she was kind of bitter about it. And then I was like, Julie, you were on Nightclub. And the reason that I remember is so funny because Curtis was like, he was my boyfriend for a little bit when we were in college. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I think like maybe my sophomore year we went out or something like that.
Wow.
And then we were friends after that. But he dumped me for Sheena. It's true.
Curtis will be playing this one in his record store. I guarantee you that.
Good.
Hi, Curtis.
Good. Hi, Curtis. We were having this conversation. He was like talking about how he was going to market us all. And I don't remember what everybody's shtick was, but I think Julie's definitely had something to do with like wearing bowling shirts, which she had this massive collection of bowling shirts, as you could imagine. And he always called me D. He didn't call me Debbie, you're Deb. He called me D. And he was like, you're going to change your name to D Wood and you're going to wear hats.
Curtis.
You hear it, right?
Julie told me to ask you something, actually. She asked you, she wanted me to ask you at the time that you and her filled in for Curtis.
Oh.
Do you remember that? What happened?
Epic. Yes, it was epic. Okay, so
well, not Curtis, Shred. You and her filled in for Shred. And people that don't know who Shred is, he became a big guy at BCN and promoter and a little label and everything. And we're all around the same. I'm a little older than you guys, but we're all pretty much around the same age.
So GBH had come to town, and it was their first U.S. tour. And I'm sure your listeners know who GBH is.
Yeah, oh yeah. Big punk, English punk band, yeah.
So Shred could interview them. Shred did this show on Sundays. It was a half-hour show. It was called the Faster Than You Show. And he played like hardcore, like those songs that were like 6 seconds long. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
The better, right? So he says, he said to one of us, can you fill in? And one of us said, sure. And then whoever it was said to the other one, let's do it together.
Yeah.
We decided to call ourselves the Shredettes. And we were sitting in the same chair. We each had half of this chair. And we're not used to playing these songs that are like 10 seconds long. So we're like grabbing a thing, trying to cue it up, because everything was vinyl and you're doing everything by hand and turntables. And it was so cool, the needle and finding
I loved it.
Song and everything. It was so tactile, right? Beautiful. You can smell it. And so I
smell my records all the time.
So Final Tap, smell the glove.
Exactly.
So
So
yeah, so we're throwing records around, and we're like both on this chair, and we're kind of falling off the chair, and we're queuing up the records, and we're talking, and we're laughing, and we're screaming, and we're like, and people are calling in, and they're like, "This is the greatest show ever." I think Shred wanted to kill us, but the response was like overwhelming. Like it was just it was hilarious. It was hilarious because Shred was so like, Shred, the faster than you show. And Julia and I were like, we're the Shredettes, and the songs. And oh my God, what are we doing? What are we doing? Wait, cue that up. Wait, it's running out. It's running out. And like people can hear us. And it was really funny.
you broke the ratings, I bet. It's really funny, but in '83, for about 6 months, I worked at the same station as Shred and Curtis, WICN in Worcester. They were coming out to Worcester to do a show there, and I was doing like a 2 to 6 hardcore show. That was right before I moved to LA, and that's when I first got to know those guys.
I think Jeff Marshall had a show on that
Yeah,
station too.
he did.
He
Wow.
did. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I didn't
I
know
did that show
Jeff
with
back
him.
then. Yeah, he probably did. It was a good station. It was a 100-watt station, not as big as ERS, but it was a good station. So tell me about the bands that you were going to see. Like Julie also told me that you managed Chain Link Fence, and I never knew that
Yeah.
because I had their record that was on
Oh,
Chuck's label,
something lobster, throbbing
Throbbing
lobster.
Lobster. Yeah. What bands did you go and see a lot that you liked in Boston? You mentioned the Del Fuego, so you must have became friends with them.
Oh yeah, well the Del Fuegos to me, they were like the band that would be playing when the sun was coming up and we were all in a loft on Thayer Street, like the end of the night, and it had been like whatever chaos we wrought that night, and then like everybody ended up on Thayer Street at a loft and the Del Fuegos were playing, and we're
Was
drinking.
it the Dogmatics Loft?
It, there's so many people had lofts on Thayer Street, but Dogmatics had them. Like there was a building that had a couple floors with different
That
bands.
that building is all stores and art galleries now. Because a friend of mine had a art gallery in that building. You would never recognize it.
Yeah, yeah.
So you would go. What do you'd go out to the Rat and whatever, and then
We
end up
went to
there?
that, and then also I got an internship. I got an internship with the promotion guy for the channel. It was David Alexander, lovely,
Okay.
lovely, lovely man. Um, but what happened was they ended up, and then they paid me to DJ, which I did for many many years um,
At the channel.
at the channel.
Wow,
And
cool.
then the booking agent, whose name was
Warren Scott.
Yes, Warren
Warren
Scott.
Scott. I used to go to the channel too. We were probably in the same room like
Oh,
many
I'm sure
times.
of it. I'm sure of it. So he hired me to book the Hardcore Sundays.
Wow.
Yeah, so I booked like Minor Threat. I booked the Bad Brains. They were like
I
six
didn't know
out.
you were a booking agent too. My God, that is fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah,
those shows were epic.
they were epic.
Epic.
Yeah, yeah. But so because I was doing that stuff, I could get into the channel free. So
Yeah.
I saw so many. I mean, God,
Were you into hardcore?
well, I was because I dated Curtis. Curtis, I hung around Shred. Like you kind of were. Uh,
Did you know like the FUs and
of course,
SSD and
yeah,
all those
yeah.
guys?
I had a funny thing happen when I was a freshman in college, and I didn't have a radio show yet, but I was just kind of acclimating to Boston and stuff. I think I might have had a show on the AM station for Emerson, and then because there was definitely like a hierarchy thing going
Oh
on, and
yeah, a lot of
you
famous
know,
people were there.
you had to kind of pay your dues before you were going to do anything. Um, and I figured out how to get on the air was that I just started to run the place. I was like the station manager a couple of times. I was the program director at least once. I was the promotion manager for a couple a couple of years. So, and then if you were doing that, they had to kind of put you on the air, you know.
That's crazy because
You
I
gotta
did.
work your angles.
That is so crazy how similar things are between us because I started as the assistant program director, then I became the music director. You had to do that, you're right. And that's how you got in. And that's
Yeah,
how you got to know everybody. But
it
go ahead.
is. And also it was cool because, you know, WERS just went beyond the
You guys
college.
were
It was
huge.
like in the community. You know, there was that coffee house folk show that was hugely popular, and we did like these huge fundraisers around like folk music. And I would go to jazz clubs and do live broadcasts from jazz clubs. So I learned how to mix live and things like that. So it was and it was an incredible education, really. And if you loved music like we do, it was you couldn't have had, you know, probably like the best years of my life, right? So, funny thing is this. Recently, I gave my biker jacket that I wore all the time in the 80s to one of the students I work with. And he's just the coolest kid. Like he loves music. He's a huge Radiohead person and it's just rare to find young kids that,
Yeah,
you know, you say like the Misfits and they actually, it's not just the t-shirt, they actually know who the Misfits are, you know, and
right.
he's one of those kids. So I lent him the jacket because he's in the drama club and I work with the drama club at the school. His character needed this biker jacket. And so at the end of the show, he's like, can I buy it from you? And I said, well, you know what? I'll give it to you, but couple things. And I told him what the couple things were that are just between me and him. So anyway, but the funny thing was that I said to him when I lent it to him, I said, that jacket has seen so much music. And he was like, what? And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna remember and like yell it out like as I remember. So he would walk past me and I'd say Misfits or Bad Brains or Echo and the Bunnymen or Charlie Watts Orchestra or, you know, like all James Brown, you know. Like, Prince, Prince Controversy Tour at the Orpheum Theater.
You saw Prince at the Orpheum?
Prince at the
Wow.
Orpheum. Yeah.
That must have been sick, man. A small venue like that. Wow.
Um, who opened up? It was oh
I
God.
love your nail polish, by the way. It's like silvery. It's
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you. Like fairy nails.
I've been wanting to say that the whole time because I'm like, wow, those are some cool colors there.
Thank you. Um, so it's like a thing I like I
Eventually, I forget that I'm recording a podcast, so don't mind me. I just start, just
yeah,
talking to
start
Debbie
talking.
South. Yeah, I'm talking to Debbie Southwood-Smith, which is so exciting for me, believe me.
Oh,
Um,
so Prince, when I was a freshman in college, you could volunteer to usher at the Orpheum. And then you could take, after everybody was in and the show started, you could take any empty seat. And so Steev, I saw you too on the boy tour. I saw the Clash 2 nights, probably Sandinista, right? Prince, that controversy.
this is in between 82 and 86, I guess it would
This
be.
would have been this would have been 80, 81.
Oh, you started at 81 at
No,
Emerson.
yeah. Wait, I graduated high school 81. I graduated college 85. So yeah,
Yeah.
81, 82. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was 1 year off because I finished school in 80. I finished college in 83. So I'd already gone to LA at the end of 83. So you probably started getting the moving up in the radio station by 84 and 85, right?
No, my sophomore year. So 82.
Wow. So you were like with ERS for like 4 straight years.
Almost, yeah. Like
Wow.
definitely three straight years.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So you saw a lot.
I saw a lot.
And I
Yeah.
could name probably about 20 people. Carmelita was in my head just now. I was thinking of her, but you were
Yeah,
probably,
Carmelita was around. She did Metrowave. You know, she was so famous for doing Metrowave, and I really felt like I had these enormous shoes to fill. Then there was a woman named Sandy. I can't remember her last name. She did it between Carmelita and myself, and then I took it over. Um, and that, you know, like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. I think their first show was playing live on Metrowave. Um,
wow.
yeah, isn't that crazy?
Well, you were the, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about that time period, you're talking about, bands like the Outlets, Neighborhoods, all the hardcore bands. Of course, Limbo. I don't know what just made me think of Limbo Race, probably because they won the Rumble during one of those years, didn't they? Or 85, 86.
What was John Havorka's band called? The
The
Turbines?
Turbines,
Them, the Neat,
Titanics,
the Titanics, the Neats, of course, the Dogmatics.
the
Um,
Neats. Wow, they were great.
oh, they were so great. You know, they were
I,
like, they could have been REM. You know
when
what I
those guys were on, I saw them at Wellesley College, and they were really surprised. And then Michael Cudahy came on my show, and I was talking about that show, and he's like, "I was there. There were only six guys there." I'm like, we were like, it was all girls and like six guys because it was Wellesley, but it was the Neats when 666 was the 45,
mean?
So that was probably 83, 82, maybe something like that.
Right.
It's going to be hard to stay on point here with you, but
Well, music, so much music. Mission of Burma. I remember seeing Mission of Burma.
wait,
That show.
all the Ace of Hearts, yeah,
Do you
Nervous Steve,
all the Ace of Hearts stuff?
yeah.
Do you remember when Mission of Burma played? I don't. Maybe they were advertised as their their final shows. I don't know
The
why.
Bradford Hotel.
Yes,
I was there.
me too. See, I knew it. We were in so many of the same rooms.
I was at the matinee, which was Dangerous Birds and Negative FX when the riot almost happened. I don't know if you were.
The Proletariat, or were they?
That was the night show, Proletariat, and I can't remember who the third band was. I tried to remember this and I can't because it was two shows, matinee and an evening show. It's incredible. I never thought we'd ever see Mission of Burma again.
It
Now,
wasn't
Peter,
Salem 66. Was Salem 66 on the evening bill?
no, I don't think so, but they were another band during that era,
I loved
definitely.
them. I loved them. I really did.
Since you brought
Dangerous
them up, I have to.
Birds, Paleozetic,
Oh,
Dangerous Birds.
I went to see. I was at Storyville all the time because I loved Dangerous Birds played there all the time. My Alvin Long, who's still my friend now, was the drummer of the November Group, and I remember seeing them all the time. And Sex Execs, of course, and all the hardcore bands, and there's so many. There's so many. Now you
So I got to tell you this little funny story, though.
please tell me as many stories as you want.
So my last Metrowave show, and I feel like I need to apologize to all the Boston bands out there of that time because I I really did something that was so uncool. But I had a reason, so I'm getting to explain it here. I'm getting to clear my name here. So it's my last show, and it was crazy. There were so many people up in that studio. I think the Mighty Mighty Bosstones played my last show. Um, I loved Scruffy the Cat, but they were on tour, and I think they were like my first choice to play or something. But I think it ended up, for some reason, I feel like the Mighty Mighty Bosstones played my last show. So everybody kept asking me for weeks leading up to that last show, what's your last song going to be? What's your last song going to be? You'll see, you'll see, you'll see. Steev, I couldn't decide. It was like the outlet's best friend. It was the neighborhood's like whatever. It was like, I loved Salem 66. I love, like, out of loyalty, should it be a chain link fence song? I love, like, there was so much, and I got overwhelmed, and I couldn't choose. And I played the Stones.
What? Wow. Okay, that was very uncollege radio for that time.
I played I love rock. I played It's Only Rock and Roll, but I like it because I was just like, you know, if I have to go off with a message, this is it. Like, I like it's my life. It's rock and roll. It's only rock and roll, but like I live for it. Like this is it. But I think that really seriously, if I had to do it again, I really might have played the Outlet's Best Friend because I think like at that time, out of those years, that song maybe meant the most.
Yeah, at that point at 85, I had already signed them to Enigma. They were like 85. 80, them and the Hoods were 85. Wow. Um, okay, we could talk about ERS forever, but you've had an unbelievable career that we need to get to. What happened when you finished school? Where did you go? Because we didn't meet up until 87, I don't think.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
was it earlier than 87 that you started at Giant?
I think 86, 87 is about
Yeah.
that's about right. Um, I was a secretary at MCA in Boston. It was actually in Woburn. I was a promotional assistant. It was,
So you went right to a record job.
I did. There was this woman, Sophia. She came up in conversation recently. I can't remember with who. There's this woman, Sophia. She married, they're not still married, the guy that managed 10,000 Maniacs. Um, she was this promotional assistant at MCA.
Hmm.
We knew each other just from because everybody was always out and about and in the clubs and
Was
everybody.
that Cummings Park? Cummings Park in Woburn?
I think so.
Yeah,
It
because
was right across from a glue factory.
PGD was in that. PGD was over there too.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so anyway, she was leaving to go get married, move to New York, and she just said, "Do you want my job?" And I said yes.
Were
And
you out of school already, or?
school, I was a couple weeks out of school. I was going on interviews. I had interviewed at I think AAF because they needed like a assistant in the promotion department or something like that, and I didn't get that job. And I was looking and I was looking and I was cocktail waitressing at the channel and I was DJing at the channel, and so that's kind of how I was making money.
You didn't plan on leaving Boston when you finished school, did you?
No, no, no. I was I knew I ultimately wanted to end up in New York, but I wasn't ready to take that New York step yet.
Right.
Which is funny, being that like I grew up going into the city all the time.
Hmm.
So I don't know what was going on with me, but I guess I just got comfortable in Boston. My friends were all there.
Did you go straight from MCA to Giant?
I did. Yeah. So then what happened was Jay Fialkov.
Jay. Yeah.
Um, but that MCA job, I just got to do a little aside. That was cool because that was right at the beginning of CDs.
Oh yeah.
And so everybody was starting to replace their vinyl collection with their CD collection. The business was rich, like so much money, right? So much.
Yeah.
Um, so it was cool. So MCA had IRS, so that was the beginning of REM. So I remember working those like early REM records. I have these like 12-inch singles in my collection from REM and stuff, promotional singles.
Those are worth a few bucks.
The Alarm.
Yeah, we just lost Mike Peters.
Yeah. Finding Cannibals. It was great. It was great. Even like that Boston album that was so big because it was like the first record they'd made in 12
Oh,
years.
that was huge.
So I saw them like night after night after night. Yeah, I even became friends with with a couple of the New England Patriots because of Boston, because we threw a party for them, and I was a big football fan. And Tank, my boss wanted there to be basketball players, football players. He wanted like Boston to be represented at this party. Like Peter Wolf was there, and we threw it like at the most expensive restaurant in Boston, and I don't remember the name of it at the time, but and my boss was really good friends with Bill Walton, the
Oh
basketball,
yeah,
right?
Celtics. Yeah,
So Tank took me to Foxborough, and I left these invitations in mailboxes. And this would have been like Steve Grogan era.
'80s. Yeah, when they went to the Super Bowl in '86. Yeah.
Who was the
No,
other? Who was the
what?
other quarterback?
What?
Um,
Eason? Tony Eason?
yeah, he was so gorgeous. Not as pretty as Tom Brady, but he was a beauty. Uh, so anyway, Mosi Tutupu's wife RSVP'd, and to this day, she's like a sister to me. So Mosi and Linnea came to the party, and then they invited me like to stay overnight at their house the next weekend and go to the game. I went to the game with her, and then that became like a every Sunday thing. Just about when there were home games, I would stay over at their place and go to the games with them. So like a lot of really crazy stories.
I remember you talking about a football player, and I thought you were related. In the back of my mind, I thought that you were
Well, their
related.
daughter is my goddaughter.
Who is?
Their daughter,
Okay, so you
Victoria,
did become
is
related.
my
Yeah.
goddaughter. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember you talking about Mosey when we're at Giant. I remember that. Definitely. So, okay, so you were so how'd you meet Jay?
Okay, so right. So I don't know. I just knew about this Boston lawyer, Jay Fialkov. I don't really remember why I knew him or whatever, but I knew I had it with being a secretary. I wanted to do something else. I was ready to go to New York. I had lunch with him. I remember this. It was at Pizzeria Uno, where Storyville was. Um,
That's sad.
yeah. and uh,
Kenmore Square. Yeah,
Kenmore
Kenmore.
Square, that crazy building. Um, and he said, actually, I think I have a job for you. And he said, I've got this label that I'm investing in, and they've got a label manager. It's primarily hardcore and the speed metal kind of stuff, and which sells a lot of records. He's like, but I really want to broaden it, and I need somebody. I think what I was brought in to do promotion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he mention me by name? And did you even know who the hell I was at that time? Probably not, right?
Yeah, because I knew your name from Julie.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Julie and
Yeah,
I had worked together. Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, I remember from what I remember is I remember Jay buying into the label, which was good because Barry, it, it was the whole Dutch East thing is so complicated. And there's so many things that have happened since then about Dutch East. It's the people that wanted the records have driven me crazy over the years, especially Field Day. Everyone wants that record. They still do. But Barry disappeared off the face of the earth. Anyways, when Jay came in,
Did?
Jay immediately, yeah, he's disappeared and no one knows where he is. And it's a real problem because a
Well,
lot of bands can't get their masters, so they freak out and they call me. And Dag Nasty Jay, if you ever talk to him, will tell you that Brian Baker called him up one day and like was screaming at him on the phone. And Jay could do nothing either. But forget about all that.
also that Tony Margarita and excuse me, not Wilco, Uncle Tupelo, they sued him.
They sued Barry.
They sued Barry, and they won. And they won.
Wow, I wonder
Yeah.
how they found him to sue him. But we're going to talk about Uncle Tupelo but let me get to this first. So Jay comes to me and he asks me, "What do you think about getting a promotion person?" I'm like, "Yeah," because I had Billy Polisi, but he was only coming in like, you remember Billy, right?
Of course I do.
He
I
was
mean,
only
just now I do. I haven't thought about him in a million years.
for all the fans and people out there that have emailed me and confronted me about Giant Records. Let me just tell you, we were in a closet, which was like a regular closet. And it was at times three of us. It was mostly Debbie and myself, but there was also and when you got there, I was like, we got to have more office space, but that never happened. We
And there was no heat and no air conditioning.
And no
Had
windows.
one window. Oh
And
my.
Gerard Cosloy next door. God
You
almighty.
remember like the heaters under the desks? Like I remember having to wear gloves like with the fingers so I could type, and oof, it was
It was rough.
rough.
But we had some good records, so that made up for it, I guess. I was not in the, I felt kind of bad a lot of the time that I was there because even though we had a good run, I was just not happy living out there. You probably knew that. I was probably cranky as hell. It was
Oh
really
my God,
difficult coming to work and having to
you
sit next to this
complained.
beautiful girl every day, you know?
Oh, stop. You complained about Barry so much. I could still hear it in my head.
You know, it
And
really,
oh,
it's,
Barry.
you know, you bring these great bands in, and we had some great bands, and then you get stuck. You hit a roadblock, and you're like, "What the fuck, man? We got to do more than we're doing." You know, I mean,
Yeah.
the Ed Stasium thing for Dag Nasty was a great idea and everything, but it was too late. You know, it all happened too late. You know, you remember that Ed Stasium remixed the song "Trouble Is" by Dag Nasty.
I don't remember. That's a hole in my memory, but it sounds vaguely right.
It was
But
a
wow,
12-inch green vinyl.
that must have sounded incredible.
It did, but it was too late, unfortunately. That song "Trouble Is" great. I just talked to Peter recently.
Oh, he's so great. What a great guy.
So you got there, and there were a bunch of bands that you probably, well, I'm sure you heard of Verbal Assault and Government Issue and Dag Nasty, and who else do we have? Uniform Choice. But I don't remember you ever saying you didn't like it. I think you enjoyed it, but it must have been a challenge for you.
I think the stuff like, for me, the stuff like Government Issue, Dag Nasty, Uniform Choice, that was like, that's not so far off from any of the college
Yeah,
radio stuff that I was playing. It was like more the speed metal stuff like that. It's not really my, that has not,
INC.
yeah.
Indestructible Noise Command.
Right, right. But I did realize that they sold.
Yeah.
You know, I did realize that they sold records.
So how do you feel now when you think about that experience of working there? You don't have to you don't have to worry about hurting my feelings or anything. I'm tough. Did you enjoy that experience?
Hmm. Such an odd question. I've never ever thought about it in those, in that
Because it was a
way.
stepping stone to the major labels, basically.
Yeah, I think that's always what it has been for me. Like, and I also feel like no matter how much we suffered, because I remember bugs on my arms. Like that office was so disgusting. I remember like taking off my watch because my arm was itching, and like it was so hot in there that like there was moisture underneath my watch, and there were bugs had like housed themselves on my wrist. It was so nasty.
Well,
Yeah.
you were dealing with the bugs. I was bothered by the guys next door. I didn't get along with them. It was
Well,
rough.
yeah, and then yeah, Gerard was never very kind to us.
No, we almost had fights and well, we had fights, but we almost had a fist fight once. I mean, it was really difficult being in that building and
Yeah,
it drove me crazy. So when Metal Blade offered me a job, I was like, "Woo."
right. And but you were there when I signed Uncle Tupelo, right?
No,
Oh, you were. You were
no,
there.
no, no. I wasn't there. You did everything that happened with Rockaway. I want to ask you about because I wasn't there. You ended up signing a band that I mean, people call them the first alt country band, you
They
know,
were
or
seminal. They were
yeah. And
seminal.
you know, Sun Vault, I've got all their records. I love them. Wilco, I'm more of a Sun Vault guy. So
That's
when
okay.
you did
I'm more
you
of a
re
Wilco person, but that's okay.
did you realize when you now tell me about how you got that band? Because they just were like the originals at that game.
There was a very nice guy who worked in the sales department who used to come over and hang out with us sometimes.
Chris Lombardi, who
Not
became the head of Matador.
Chris. No, no, definitely not Chris. He's a character, man. He's a character these
That's
days.
pretty funny too when you think about you worked at RES with all ERS with all these people. Think about all the people that worked in that building.
I know. No.
There would be no
I
Matador records, you know?
Tony Margarita, who managed Uncle Tupelo and then managed Wilco for a long time, he ran a record store in oh my god, St. Louis.
Missouri?
Yeah, yeah, I guess in St. Louis. Oh, the band. That's right. Yes, because the band was from East St. Louis. That's what I'm trying to.
I always thought they were a Chicago band. Wow, that's
Well, no,
weird.
Jeff Tweedy and his family live in Chicago now, and he married Sue from who had Lounge Acts, like one of the greatest clubs.
Lounge Jacks. I've been there. That place is great. Is that still there?
No, no,
Oh,
unfortunately, no.
bummer.
That was like one of the greatest places. Um, so, uh, so Tony, so the sales manager said, can I send you? I'm working with this band. Can I send you the tape? And this guy brought it to me. He said, would you listen to this? And I listened, and I was like, oh,
Craig.
so great.
Craig? Craig Marks.
Not Craig. It wasn't Craig Marks.
Huh. Okay, sorry. I was trying to remember who the other person was, but that's okay.
No.
So you got it.
It was one of the Dutchie salespeople.
Can't remember all those guys.
Yeah, it was one of the Dutchie salespeople. He was lovely, and Tony had given him the cassette, and then he gave it to the cassette. We're talking about cassettes. How cool is that? He gave me the cassette, and I loved it. So I flew with my own money on my own dime. Yes,
You
and here
did?
I am, as it was, living over a dry cleaner on a futon with no frame in an apartment with no
Were
furniture.
you in Long Island?
I lived with Patty Mooney, who did all our art stuff.
Patty Mooney. Oh my God, I forgot
Yes.
about her. Wow.
Somehow I saved up the whatever it was, $200 to make this journey to. They were playing actually in Lexington, and there's almost nobody there or whatever, but they were magical. They were just so fantastic. Maybe I did go see them at Cicero's. I don't, because I know subsequently I did end up seeing them at Cicero's quite often.
That's a
But
great signing right there.
and then we brought them to New York to play for the new music seminar because Jay wanted to see them, and it was last minute. And they ended up. Do you remember that place next door to CBGB's that had like it was like I don't know. Remember was it a record store or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I remember that
Or
place.
something.
It became part of CB's eventually, but
It was like
I don't remember what it was called.
I think it was called CB's Canteen.
Yeah, there you go. CB's Canteen.
They played there, which was like a loft over, I don't know, like a loft about as big as a table or something. Like they played there, but they had this buzz. It was like them, Teenage Fan Club, like that new music seminar was like Uncle Tupelo Teenage Fan Club. That's what everybody wanted to see. Um,
Did you have the same problem with Uncle Tupelo that we had with the Giant records? The distribution was just not big enough for these
yeah,
bands.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And they were touring. I feel like Suzanne McCarthy, Flower Booking, was their booking agent. Um, so, and they had and the press, they were press darlings. They were just press darlings, and other bands loved them. Soul Asylum loved them. It was like that time.
What about the relationship between Jay and Jeff?
Jay and Jeff Tweedy. Jay,
Yeah,
no, Jay and Jeff.
yeah.
Oh, well, at that time they lived together. They lived in a loft. They were fine. They were drunk all the time. They're like young boys that were drunk all the time. They drank all the time. Yeah,
Because they had a falling out eventually, didn't they?
They did. Yeah, they did.
That was a nice way to put it. I watched the Wilco documentary, and that was painful. The
Yeah.
Jay Bennett
Ooh,
Tweedy relationship. Oh,
yeah. But I think like that relationship made one of their greatest records.
Yeah,
You
oh yeah,
know?
Yankee Foxtrot, right? See, I do like some things about Wilco. I didn't mean to imply that I didn't like him altogether, but
No, that's okay. That's
I
okay.
Got
But,
You is a great song. That
I
song,
think, Jeff was so charismatic, and and it was kind of like Jay was the vocalist because Jeff had that like very thin voice, but it says so much. His voice, it really is. It's a rock and roll. There's so many great weird voices, right? Like Dylan, come on, right? So,
did you see? Could you see what was going to happen with these guys? Did you
well,
have an idea?
I knew that. Well, what I saw was that they were going to end up on a major label. That's what I saw. I didn't see that they were going to split. I wasn't working with them at that point but even in those early days, you could see that like Jeff really had these fans because he had so much charisma, and he only really did a couple of the songs in the repertoire.
Right.
And Jay was really the singer, but you could see like Jeff kind of wanting to step up, wanting to bring more songs to the table, kind of that. So there was that friction. But I think by the time Joe, who signed them to Sire? Joe, great guy.
I
Joe,
don't.
oh, I can't
Oh,
remember.
it was in the film, and I can't remember
No,
now.
I can't remember his last name. He's such a lovely, lovely person. Um, I think that became his problem.
I do want to.
I eventually left. So what happened for those who are listening, although you might know this already from Steev, is that Giant Records, we sold our name to Irving Azoff because he wanted to call his label that
Barry didn't split any of that money up.
he wanted to and we probably could have gotten a lot more money than we did. It was like pennies really when you think about it.
75,000, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's like really nothing. Like we really could have done better, probably. But yeah, because Irving is not a tall man, so he wanted to call his label Giant. Um, I actually have worked for two labels. Wait, how did it go? There's something about how I'm like the only person who's worked for both labels that I think Irving Azoff bought names of.
Oh my God, that's funny. I never thought you worked for the other giant.
I worked for a label called Revolution.
Oh yeah, Revolution. I remember that label. A woman ran that label, right?
It was,
Maybe I'm. There were a lot of labels back then.
wait,
Be-
no, you're going to know this guy. Ron managed Megadeth.
oh yeah, Ron. Ron. Yeah, I know Ron. Lafitte. Ron Lafitte.
Ron Lafitte. It was his label.
That's
It
right.
was his label.
Sorry, I was thinking of another label that started with
It
an
was like
R.
a boutique label that he was given because of Megadeth by a major label. So I worked for Revolution, and I feel like Revolution ended up selling their name to Irving as well.
Was that after John? Okay, before we closed, I just want to about the Wilco and the Sunvolt thing. Um, it was a great. It was just great. It was you were so far ahead of everybody with that. The reason I became more of a Sunvolt fan is because I love Jay's voice. It's just the greatest voice. And you know what? They don't even have a lot of good songs. I just like his voice. Wilco's got way more better songs. But Jay's singing, I just wanted to tell you that because you signed
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah, no, he had a masterful voice, and his songs really have depth and meaning. Like he sings about real people and real things, and
the Keith Richards song he wrote was great.
yeah,
He wrote a song about Keith called Cocaine and Ashes. That's a good one.
yeah,
Good
that
one.
is.
So when
Um,
did you leave Rockaway and where'd you go?
it was Rockville because we were in
Rock,
Rockville Center,
sorry, Rockville.
right? Rockaway.
When I
We just
left,
did Long Island, and
listen, when I left Rockville Center, I never wanted to look back.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I don't blame you. Um, so what happened was this is a funny story too. It's a great story actually. Um, you know, I was everywhere in those days. Like I was out every night, everywhere, at every show, at every stupid like little hole in the
And
wall
this is New York City now.
in New York City, on the Lower East Side, everywhere, 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 everywhere. We would run around and we would go to like, we'd see as many bands a night as we possibly could. Like that was the aim, you know? And I caught the eye of Brian Koppelman, who is Charles Koppelman's
Yeah.
son, the publishing mogul. And Brian was an aspiring A&R person, and he was now, if you don't know who Brian is, now Brian is
Filmmaker, right?
he's a filmmaker.
Yeah.
He was the showrunner, creator of Billions. He made a
Oh,
movie
yeah. Good one.
that people love, that I love, called Rounders, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great, fucking great movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, Brian's like the man. So talented, such a talented.
I met him a couple times. Interesting guy.
Really, very, very nice, very, very smart. So I caught his eye, and he was like, one night, I think probably at CB's, he said, "I see you everywhere. Who are you?" So I introduced myself to him, and we just became friends. Like,
and you were still with Rock. You were still with in Long Island at that time, right? Yeah. Okay.
Living in Brooklyn, commuting to Long Island, running around the Lower East Side.
Okay.
That was my life, right? God, wouldn't you just love to have an ounce of the energy? An ounce of the energy, right?
Yeah. You're talking to someone who can't make it to 10 o'clock anymore. So,
right.
you know.
I know. My alarm goes off like 4:45. It's crazy. Like I was still out. Back in those days, I would still be out. But anyway, so we just talked music, and he took me to see the Black Crowes, their first show in Wetlands. He was like, I'm gonna take you to see a band. It's gonna blow your mind. He wouldn't tell me who they were. They hit the stage, and I was like, oh.
That's wild, because the first time I saw Pearl Jam was at Wetlands. That must be where all the major bands started.
I'm sorry. I was at that show too. I was at that Pearl Jam
They
show.
played 2 nights in a row out there. I already knew those guys because I had worked with Mother Love Bone. Because at Metal Blade we did all the marketing, and I got to meet Jeff and Stone. They came to Metal Blade, but I had no idea that Pearl Jam was going to be. They packed that room. It was New Music Seminar, right?
I don't remember. I just know.
Or CMJ, one of the two. But it was Wetlands. I know that.
And he handed me his water bottle. I was right up front. He handed me his water bottle, and people were pissed. They were like, "Why did he hand it to you?" I was like, "I don't know, because I'm standing here."
Is this Chris Robinson or Eddie Vedder? Which one?
No, Eddie Vedder. Eddie Vedder handed me his water bottle at that Wetland show.
He knew. He knew.
Anyway, so then Brian came to me and said, "Listen, my father, some other people are taking over EMI. Chrysalis was SPK.
I remember that label too. There were so many.
But it basically was an amalgamation of EMI and Chrysalis and maybe something else that I'm not remembering, but that was SPK. It didn't last that long.
Wow.
And he said, we need an A&R person at Chrysalis, at the Chrysalis part of it. So you're going to interview with Fred Davis. I'm sending you on an interview with Fred Davis, like that day, like whatever it was. He called me, and it was like that day. You have to go today. So I sit down with Fred. I'm in this like skyscraper in Midtown, and coming from that shitty office in Long Island to this, Midtown skyriser. And I'm sitting there with Fred Davis, who's Clive Davis's son, and another very, very lovely man.
Yeah.
And he's asking me these questions and about like stuff that's happening on the street. And Steev, it was just my lucky day, because every artist he asked me about, I had their cassette in my bag, or I had seen them the night before, or I had a review or some article in my bag, like every single one. When I walked out of there, I had the job. Like, I think he asked me, like, in the interview, okay, how much do you need to make? Like, it was
Wow.
a done deal. Like, it was so obvious. Like, how can this not happen? Like,
You were made to be an A&R person.
I nailed like every single thing you asked me. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Um, and
So what happened there?
our people really were just like a combination of those of us who weren't musicians, and I was never a musician. I think it was like really a combination of loving to do research, which I do, and having an ability to connect people, which I've always been really good at, you know,
Yeah.
because you're connecting all the dots of making a record, right? And putting people together and putting locations together and all of that stuff, you know. And so it's those kinds of talents. So, or that's what I was strong in anyway. I guess everybody brought their own thing to it. But yeah, so I went to EMI, and that's where I signed Degeneration. That's where I signed Degeneration. Yeah, so we went
So
from
now you're 2 for 2 with two great bands. I can't wait to keep going here.
Uncle Tupelo, Degeneration. But you know, the sad thing about Degeneration is that they're like legendary in this almost mythical way of like
Everyone knows Jesse.
everyone knows Jesse. And God bless Jesse. Jesse just slayed 2 shows in London. I don't know if you've been seeing that on social media, but
Great story. I
he
never even heard of the disease he had. It's so weird, you know?
it's the spinal stroke. It's just a really
I
weird
never had heard of that before.
weird thing. No, me neither. Me neither. And I never would have thought that anything like that could happen to him. Just the most loving, generous person. And that was the thing with Degeneration. Like, Degeneration changed my life, Steev, you know, because they became my family. It was beyond just signing them and making a record with them, and that because I signed them and we made a record. And David Bianco, another one we lost, he produced Tom Petty's Wallflowers.
Yeah.
He we made this record with him at Electric Lady Studios, and as we're like putting the marketing plan together, and as the record's getting towards a release date and all of that, and there's a single out, No Way Out is out. It's getting played. Um,
Was
on
that on your end? Did
that,
you?
yeah, I got a text. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. I thought something happened to this. I was
No,
like, what?
I'm
It
sorry.
was so loud in I'm like,
Oh, well, good. Well, I'm glad things are loud in your headphones, because I'm so concerned that you're like my volume's going to be really bad. So, damn, what was I saying?
you're talking about No Way Out. Great
No Way
song.
Out. Yeah, No Way Out was just organically getting played on radio stations. We had a K Rock in New York. Remember that?
Yeah.
And then in LA as well. And it was like every hour on the hour you were hearing No Way Out. And then there was a merger. There was not a merger. There was a oh my God, what do you call a corporate
Some sort of a split,
when they kick everybody
consolidation.
out, when they fire everybody from upstairs. What is that called?
That happens a lot in the music business,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I can't think of the term. I've survived so many of them.
Layoff? You mean a layoff?
Well, they kicked out Fred Davis. They kicked out lovely Daniel Glass was the president. Fred
Daniel Glass, I remember
was
him.
the vice president. They just cleaned house, and they brought in David Segerson.
How long did you last?
Like 10 seconds. David, let me tell you this story. Let me tell you this story, because people need to know this story, okay? So David hated Degeneration. I don't know why. There's just some people out there that hate real rock and roll. I feel sorry for them, but they're out there. But I had this lunch with him because he was interviewing everybody. And, obviously, like I'm an English teacher now, I love to read and I would devour books. But, I lived for books and music, lived for them. So we talked, because he graduated from Oxford. So I sat there, I watched him eat an entire steak, and we talked about books. So it comes down to like, okay, everybody's out. He's in now. He's done all his little interviews. And he calls me into his office. He says, well, I don't want to keep you in A&R, but I don't want to lose you because you read. So I'm thinking of creating a position that I'd like you to fill as an in-house stylist.
Sorry, I dropped everything when you said that. You had me when I know you like to read. I'm like, what?
It was the most sexist thing. It was really like, and maybe this is a happy story in a way, because it really was the most sexist thing that happened to me in the music business. And I know, like, in the 90s, there was a lot of sexism going on. So if that was the worst thing, it's not a bad story. But still, if you think about it, and that happened today, I'd have a lawsuit. But not back then. Not back then. So, but the thing was, A&M had been sniffing around me.
Don't skip it. Oh, Interscope's after A&M. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Or yeah, it is. Okay, sorry. Oh, good. We're getting
We get into
A&M. I remember that label.
oh yeah.
We worked. Oh, wait a second. Were you talking about you did things twice with people? We worked together twice.
We did.
But the weird thing about it is A&R at a major label, for people that don't know, that department's in their own world. Okay. And then you got, I was in marketing in it. Even though Brian Huttenhauer hired me with his master plan and let me record all these bands like Down by Law in Studio C, I knew I was never going to be an A&R guy because David Anderley, when I met with him, I knew they had enough A&R people at that time. This was like 91. So this is before you got, I'm going to lead it up to you. Okay.
Okay.
And so Brian hires me and I'm working as an A&R consultant with him for like a year. And then his master plan was, okay, Steev, I got Dan the Machine, I got Paul, we got Monster United, we got Therapy. You need to go in marketing because they don't have anyone that used to work at Metal Blade and knows anything about heavy music. So they moved me over there. And that's why I ended up on a planet far from you. In fact, I remember when I had moved to New York after I went from Jill Glass to Richie Gallo, and he moved me to New York. And then I remember hearing in New York, we're hiring a new A&R person, Debbie Southwood-Smith. I'm like, what? Debbie? And then I loved it when I went over to the office in Manhattan and I saw you, and I was like, wow, what are you doing here? So now you tell how you got there.
It was Jim Phelan, who was a producer manager. And I just knew him because he would always come through into New York, and he'd take all the A&R people out to lunch because that's what those guys did, right? Talk about guys. And we just really got along very, very well. And he was kind of a shy man, but he really liked me. And he was going to run the A&R department in New York, and they didn't really have an A&R department in New York at A&M, but they started one, and they hired Jim to run it, and he needed somebody under him. And so I was his first choice, but I had to interview with David Anderley and get his blessing, like you did, because David was the man.
Oh, yeah.
And I hated leaving D-Generation, but I wasn't going to make it. I didn't want to be an in-house stylist. Like, I didn't want that. In as much as like I was funky looking. I had like short. I dyed my hair blonde. I used to wear long dresses with Chuck Taylors. Like
You
I'm
did
sure
wear yeah, I remember that look. I remember that look. You've changed your look a few times, but it's
I,
always good.
I'm definitely a chameleon. I'm like a yeah. I'm definitely a chameleon. Um, so uh,
I just want to hear about you going to LA and talking to Anderly because I remember when I talked to him for the first time. What a guy. Please tell me.
I have such good Anderley stories. I really do. I really do. I love, love that man. I don't even want to talk about him in the past tense because like he so much still exists in my heart. You know, I love him. I'm getting teary eyed. I love him so much. He was my mentor. Like I learned how to be an A&R person from David Anderley.
It doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, yeah,
The guy that hung around with the Beach Boys and the Doors before he even got to A&M, you know?
right. Yeah, just because he was cool, like he was the king of cool.
Can I tell you one thing Anderly said to me that I remember when I went to talk to him? He said, "We don't care if we sign every band. We just want to know that we knew about that band." And I thought that was one of the most prolific things anyone ever said to me in the music business.
And
Seriously.
he would just say shit like that, you know? Like that was, yeah. So,
He told me about Charlie too, because I had to ask him about Charlie Manson. He told me that Charlie Manson auditioned for him, and I was like, "What?"
I never heard that story.
Charlie, the drummer of the Beach Boys, one of the Wilson brothers, brought him to meet Charlie. Brought Charlie to meet him. I can't believe you didn't hear that
Dennis
story.
Wilson, the drummer for the Beach Boys?
Dennis Wilson, yes.
Wow.
This is way before A&M. David was a very, very young at the time. I think it was
Oh, I know.
Elektra,
I know.
Elektra Records.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
was it Elektra? Yeah, it was Elektra.
Because because I think,
Nico, we talked about Nico.
oh, yeah, you had to, because he had that photo of her sitting on his lap in his office, right? And then he
Yeah,
had the lyrics to White Rabbit written out in like with all this cartoon stuff by Grace Slick.
he was so mellow too. He was always like very,
So I'll tell you, like with him, you know, talk about family. Like I had my Degeneration family. Degeneration gave me this family in New York, and of course, like Jesse had Coney Island High when I signed Degeneration. So like and so of course I was like a VIP at Coney Island High, and I also he let me DJ there. So I was seeing these great shows there. So
yeah, I love
I had
that
like
place.
that. I had like my New York family, and then I'd go to LA because A&M was there, and I'd be living in a hotel, and you know the recording studios were there, so you just ended up in LA for like long periods of time. So I almost like in the A&M and the Interscope years sort of was like a bi-coastal person. Um, and and David knew that I was missing home. You know, he knew I was far away from home. So every Sunday, I would go to his house. We would read the LA Times. We'd sit outside. We'd read the LA Times. We'd clean up his yard. We'd clean up his deck. His wife would make dinner. We'd watch the X Files, and then I would go home.
Well, you were really close to David.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He treated me like a daughter. You know, it was beautiful. It was
Was
beautiful.
Brian already gone by that point?
Yeah, he was. Okay, let's go into A&M. Let's full force go into A&M.
Because
So,
Brian Huttenhauer brought me to A&M, so I would never have worked there if it wasn't for him. And then he
so
just went off the rails,
he went off the
unfortunately.
rails, and that's how I got Monster Magnet.
Yeah, I want to talk about Monster. Oh, you want to talk about Monster Magnet now? Are we going to talk about something that you wrote that blew my mind when I read it?
Oh, that Dave and I were lovers when we were making that.
Wow.
You know, it happens all the time in movies,
Okay,
right?
here we go. I'm going to really throw it at you. Were you at the channel when, why can't I think of that band he was in? Oh, shit. What was the name of the band he was in before Monster Magnet? His first band?
Dave
Oh,
Lindorf? You know,
yes.
I'm thinking about Josh and Caius.
No, no, I got to look this up now because this is a great story and I can't remember the name of the band. I don't even know if it'll say it on his Wikipedia page. I loved hanging around with him, though. He was one of the most interesting people. Obviously, you loved Shrapnel.
Oh, oh, Shrapnel. That's
Yeah.
right.
Do you remember when Shrapnel played the Boy's Life CD album release show at the channel? I was there.
No. Wow.
Yeah.
No.
That might have been before you. That was like more like 81, maybe. Yeah, that was a few years before. Anyways, I thought maybe you were, yeah, because
No,
you were.
no, I didn't know Dave until I started working. Like I knew Monster Magnet, but I didn't know Dave until I started working with
I
him.
thought Emily Kay had Monster Magnet.
No, see, okay, this is the thing, and I'm so glad you brought this up. I really am so glad you brought this up because I didn't sign Monster Magnet.
Emily doesn't get credit, but she did.
She or her I guess she probably brought it to her boss.
Larry Ham, no, Larry Hamby.
Larry Hamby.
She brought
She
Monster Magnet to him. That's a fact I do know because
yeah.
I was there when that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they don't get credit. I get the credit for signing them and I didn't sign them. I made Power Trip. I made the
Yeah.
record that put them on the map. So let me tell you that story. Okay, so what the end of EMI is just that.
Dopes of the Infinity was a good record too, by the way.
Well, oh, I love that record. Oh man, I
I
love
worked on that one.
Negasonic Teenage. Oh,
Yeah.
so good.
Go
So
ahead though. Sorry.
I just said to A&M, if you want to hire me, you need to hire me now. And they did. And so then I got to walk into David's office and say, sayonara, going to A&M. Felt so good. So, because, like, if you have to make a choice between EMI and A&M,
Oh yeah.
going to A&M.
We're lucky we worked at that label. Definitely.
So, so yeah, I just loved it. And like my interview with David Anderley, it lasted like 3 hours. Like we talked and then I just ended up hanging out with him. And at that point again, you have the job. Like if you've spent 3 hours in this man's office, you've done
Yeah,
the
he
job.
was a solid guy. I got to tell you another story. When the first day I went over and Brian said, "We're going to give you this job, but you have to meet with David first." I met with David. He gave the thumbs up. Then I went over there a second time, and I remember walking in the lot, and there's Herb Albert. He's still there, and he's on his way out. And Brian's like, "You want to meet Herb?" What? And I met Herb Albert. And I told him my mother played Herb Albert in the Tijuana Brass Records when I was a little kid, and he loved it. He was a nice guy, too. There were a lot of nice guys. Al Cafaro was a very nice guy, too. There were the people at the top of A&M, good people, all
Yeah,
good people.
it might have almost been Al's undoing that he was too nice a guy in many respects, I think. But A&M was hot. When I was at A&M, it was Blues Traveler, it was Sheryl Crow, it was Monster Magnet, it was what else was
I don't
going
know if you can see my 7 million. It's sitting on the floor because I have figured out it's my Sheryl Crow $7 million one, 7 million sales one.
And gotta give it up for David Anderley. Like what? Judy Collins, right? Like
I,
Sheryl Crow. You know what I mean? Like,
I bought a book, Glenn John's book. You know, Glenn John. I bought a book that he wrote, and there's a whole chapter about Anderley in it.
well, I stayed over at Anderley's house. I was visiting LA after my music business days, and I stayed with him before he passed. And I was staying in the Glenn John's bedroom.
Glenn John stayed there too?
He would stay with Anderley when he
Wow.
would come to LA. Yeah.
I remember seeing Get Back, and I was like, that dude's the coolest dude I've ever seen.
Right?
Every time they showed Glenn Johns, I was like, I want to be him or one of the faces, you know? I mean, it's like,
Totally. And oh my God, he was so beautiful too. It's like, wow.
okay, so you get Monster Magnet. How did that happen?
Oh, so because Brian imploded. Yeah.
And
Because,
so they gave you Monster Magnet. Did you know anything about the band when you
well, let me tell you this. This is what happened. I get called into David Anderley's office. I get called to LA. I get called into David Anderley's office. I don't know what's going on. I'm like a little nervous, of course. and because I'd signed this trio, Luster, and really nothing happened with them. They were lovely, lovely guys from North Carolina, but nothing.
Which band was it?
They were called Luster.
Oh yeah, Luster.
Kind of
Yeah, of
really like
course.
a college
Yeah,
radio band.
I saw Luster. I remember them. I was still there when Luster came. Yeah.
The cool thing with Luster was that they came with a road manager named Thomas O'Keefe, and he then ended up being D-Generation's road manager.
Wow.
And he was also somehow in like the Ryan Adams world, who I really kind of discovered. I didn't get to sign him. That's a whole other story. But and is now Weezer's road manager. He works a lot with
You said Ryan Adams, right?
Ryan with an R, not Brian.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to be like, wait, you discovered Brian Adams?
No, Ryan. Little asshole Ryan.
I got to hang out with Brian Adams.
So Monster Magnet. So I get called into David's office, and he says, "We want you to A&R the next Monster Magnet record."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh my god, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?" And I had been hearing these stories that Brian had like bad, problems, and that and everybody knew like he wasn't showing up for work. He'd like disappeared. There was all of these stories, some lawyers, guns, and money, right? Like all of that stuff. Like
guns. Oh
yeah.
man, I don't know if I should tell you this Brian story on. I might have to wait till after they tell you the story.
Okay. But yeah, so the all those rumors, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that were like there was truth behind them. It sounds like some of them. So
I didn't mean to make it appear that there was truth, but I think I did.
But here's the thing. He also said they have to have a hit. He said, we want you to make the next Monster Magnet record, but they have to have a hit.
Wow, that's pressure.
Yeah. And I've never really had anybody say, like, put me in that position of like, it's got to happen now. And
so they were this close to getting dropped, basically, right?
Yeah. He said, the last one was an almost. The last one was an almost. Every record they've been growing. The last one was an almost. This one has to do it.
Super Judge. I think I said the wrong name before when I said Dopes of Infinity was just a single.
No, it was Super Judge and then Dopes to Infinity. You're right.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
Tell me about your first meeting with Dave.
Well, I was going to.
Okay.
So, Michael Alago.
Oh yeah, I love Michael.
Michael is one of my very, very,
I know that. You guys are tight. I know. Yeah. He's a good guy. Good guy.
So I knew that Michael was very close with Dave. So I called Michael. I said, listen, I got to meet Windorf. I'm nervous because I've just heard that he's such an asshole. I've heard like he's this big asshole. And
him and I got along fine. He was nice.
Really difficult to work with. And, all of these things that people had filled my head up about Dave Windorf. So I was nervous to meet him. So I said, come with me. So he came with me. And then, of course, Dave was a pussycat. And he's like really one of the most fun people to be around. Because Dave can tell you about a movie and make it better than if you'd actually watched the movie. Like he's so entertaining, like when he's on, there's no one that's better. There's no one that's better. And he's so smart and just like really a pop culture genius.
It's funny. I became good friends with Inger Laurie, and those two grew up together and were friends. Can you imagine Inger Laurie from the Nymphs and Dave Windorf hanging out together?
Like, yeah.
I think they did more than hang out, actually.
Well, that was Dave for you. And yeah, he was just so sexy. He was just so sexy. He was like just so larger than life and like sexy in that like rock and roll way. There was just like, he's not a good looking man by any stretch of the imagination, but he's like sex just kind of poured off of him. And I played that up with them. You know, I put them in black leather. I was like, you know, if you're gonna, even in as much as this is a parody of, like, you guys are like you're kind of making fun of this, but your fans don't realize it. And so just be it, you know, just be that thing that you're kind of making fun of.
That
So
kind of sounds like the video you guys made. Now that you say it that way, the video was like that wasn't really Monster Magnet. It was like a
well, it was a hip hop video. It is like shot for shot a hip hop video by a hip hop artist
really
that we
wow,
just remade exactly the same, but with a rock band.
fantastic. That video is great, by the
And
way. I'm
then
not.
what happened was like MTV watchers thought it was a hip hop video because it looked like a hip hop video, even though it didn't sound like one. So it became like hugely popular because it just crossed like all these boundaries. Like really, like urban listeners were like, Monster Magnet's the bomb, you know?
Who are you? Which product manager were you working with? I can't remember who had Monster. Was it Brad? Brad
Brad had,
Pollock?
Brad had Monster Magnet.
So
Yeah.
you and Brad together, that's a good combo.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh my God. What a great guy. What a great, great guy. And then I had Diane Gentile had been hired for radio, and she was a lioness, you know, like she was fire.
She worked for JB Brenner.
Yeah. And she was in New York, and she was just an incredible, like, she's just such a workaholic, you know. And then don't remember who, maybe Stacy was probably their publicist because Stacy would have been East Coast.
This is really great. Your career is amazing, and we haven't even got to the biggest part of your career yet.
Um, that's so funny.
I'm
So,
proud
okay,
of you.
so
I'm proud of you because I knew you when you were just starting off.
thank you. Thank you. Well, you know, kind of going back to the question you asked me about like Giant Rockville, was it, you know, how I feel about that time of my life? I feel like it was a gift, you know, it was a gift to have signed Uncle Tupelo because, like, I don't know if I'd really have the legacy that I have without that band, you know, being kind of who they ended up being to people. Uh, so, so like it was worth the pain.
You know, if you're just going to talk about your big four, that's a pretty big four right there, okay? Uncle Tupelo, D-Generation, Monster Magnet, and Queens of the Stone Age.
And the
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yes,
I'm sorry?
the yeah, yeah, yes,
You signed the Yeah, Yeah, Yes. How did I not know that?
yeah.
Wow. That's a good one too. Wow, you're going to the A&R Hall of Fame. I'm putting you in
I
there right
also
now.
signed with Pete Gambarg, who's a bigwig at Columbia now. I signed an artist group called Blessid Union of Souls
Oh,
to
wow.
well,
Yeah, they
and they had, you know, great, beautiful songs, great singles, blah 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 blah. So anyway,
I've done, let me just tell you something. I've done like you're the 392nd podcast, and I never did a podcast with no notes until this one. I swear, no notes.
wow,
I just felt like, you know what? I'm just gonna, because Julie wrote me this bio of herself, and other people do that, but I'm like, I'm thinking I know Debbie Southwood-Smith, but I didn't know about the yeah, yeah, yes. I feel like dumb now.
well, this also came about like it was, you know, this came about very last minute. Like Steev asked me to do this last week.
I know,
Um,
but you don't have to like defend me. It's okay.
but anyway, and honestly, I wouldn't have had time to write you a bio. Like my
I know
weeks
I didn't want
like
you to either. I
that.
did, you know, I did. I sometimes I just look online. I didn't know about the only thing I feel like I missed that I'm surprised I missed is yeah, yeah, yes. Because I remember when they first came out, I was excited about that band. Really good band.
You know, people to this day still love them. At the high school, like this Hispanic kids dancing to maps because it's like a TikTok thing. It's really crazy. I was at the gym this week, Y Control by the AES was blasting in the gym. And it's so exciting when that stuff happens, when I hear it. And there's nobody I can turn to and go like, I made that record. I just feel the pride in my heart.
I don't want to forget to ask you this, but do your kids know about you?
You know what I tell them? I tell them that I was a record executive. I tell them I worked with a bunch of groups they probably wouldn't have heard of, but I tell them I did attend a party at 50 Cent's house.
Very good.
Yeah, so that's what they know. They know that an English teacher went to a party at 50 Cent's house.
That's all they need to know.
That's all they need to know.
Yeah, I didn't ask you what high school because I don't want to, I don't want to mix this with that. But it's funny, you're far from the first school teacher I've had. Jamie Sharap has been on the show, Nancy Burrell, Mark Johnson from Executioner. I don't know if you remember that band.
Wow. That's crazy.
Julie, a lot of school teachers.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about how you left A&M and ended up at Interscope.
All right, so the Monster Magnet record was huge.
Yeah.
And Andy Gould managed. I wanted to put that into
Andy.
Andy, and we love Andy, right? What a character! Oh my God. So I just want to clear up another thing. Like the thing with me and Dave, that lasted as long as making the record lasted. Like it, and then it was done, and they were on the road and they were doing their thing. And
so no one knew about that at A&M at the time, right?
Andrely knew. I think everybody knew. I think everybody knew. He just didn't care because who was he to talk? Like, come on. I can't think of the artist's name. He had it in the 60s.
I was shocked when I read that thing. When I can't remember if you did a video or you wrote about it, but I remember hearing that and I was like, that is real. That shock. I don't know. It was shocking to me because I knew both of you. I don't know David as well as I got to know you, but I did hang out with him. I went to a lot of Monster Magnet shows back then.
Probably because it was it was in the moment of just making Power Trip. It was just in that moment.
It obviously worked. The formula worked.
It did. No, it did. It did because he's a pain in the ass and very lazy, and he needs somebody to organize his insanity. And I was able to do that, and I could motivate him because sex is a great motivator. And so I could get him to do his job. I could get him to do his job. So
bringing the juice, Debbie Southwood-Smith's bringing the juice to the show.
You use what you got, but no, he was so much fun to be around. So I loved hanging out with him. But but that was just a little microcosm of the whole thing of working with that band.
Yeah, there's no point in hiding things from your past anymore. I mean, in general, all of us. I mean, it's pointless. I'll admit the stupid things I did, and I've talked about people I've slept with too. So I mean, whatever. It's rock and roll, man.
It's rock and roll, exactly. And I mean, I think that's why, because David Andrely had a torrid affair with Rita Coolidge, right? That was torrid, throwing, and it was very similar to me and Dave's because they would throw things at each other. So David definitely knew, he knew. But David did one day say to me, because I made out with Gene Simmons, and then Gene Simmons stalked me, and David said, "You know what, Debbie? You are a very smart girl who does very stupid things."
Wait a minute, did you say, wait, I almost didn't want to believe that you just said you made out with Gene Simmons. Did you say that?
Yeah, Bob Chiappardi had rented out the Santa Monica Pier for a concrete marketing party. And Gene Simmons was there. And me and Andy Gould and Bob Chiappardi drank pina coladas for breakfast before going to this party at the Ivy or something. And so I'm tipsy. It's noon. We're in Bob's convertible. It was such a crazy day. I walk in, I see Gene Simmons. I said, I'm going to kiss him. Bob's like, they're like, what? I said, I'm going to kiss him. I've been looking at that tongue since I'm 13 years old. I'm going to kiss him. So Bob's like, well, I can introduce you. And I was like, I got this. So I walk over and Gene's like in a huddle with a bunch of people. Everybody's sort of huddled. And it turned out then, so I just break in and I get into the huddle and they're telling dirty jokes. Like he's telling dirty jokes. So the huddle breaks up and I looked at him and he grabbed my face and he said, who are you? And I said, would you kiss me? And he just grabbed me. And the next thing I knew, like, Gene's tongue's down my mouth and his hands down my pants. And he's like grabbing my ass. So then that ends. And somebody has filmed this because years later, I heard from somebody, I don't know who it is, but maybe they'll listen to this and they'll DM me or something. But somebody said, I think I have film footage of you kissing Gene Simmons. And I said, yes, you do.
Wow.
So then he said, well, he's like, who are you? And I said, oh, I do A&R at A&M, but I work out of the New York office. So that's it. I go, I hang out with Bob and Andy. We do the party, whatever. I leave. Next day, my hotel phone rings. I'm staying at the Bellage. I always stayed at the Bellage. My hotel phone rings, and it's Gene Simmons. Like, he found out who the New York A&R person was, what her name was, and then he had somebody find out where I was staying.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did that freak you out?
It totally freaked me out. And I got really scared. And so I went running to David Anderley and I was like, what do I do? And he said, Debbie, you are a very smart girl who does very stupid things. He was like, Gene Simmons is a very powerful man. You can't play around with people like that. But he called my office in New York for like months after that, and I was never there. Like whenever he called, and my assistant knew his voice. She was like, I've heard this voice my whole life. I know who this is. But he would say it was Joe Smith. Tell her Joe Smith called. I'm in New York. Tell her Joe Smith called. So what happens is my assistant and her boyfriend want to go see Kiss. That's what she wanted for a Christmas present. I get Kiss tickets. I do not realize that the tickets that I have, we're practically sitting on the stage. So, and we're on Gene's side. So I'm like, oh my God, he's going to see me. This is terrible. And then I'm like, no, I have a cowboy hat on. My hair was in pigtails that day. He's not going to recognize me. Steev, last song of the set, he's standing on that riser. And he points at me. And then he does that. I ran out of Madison Square Garden so fast. I was like, I have to go. He's going to send somebody out here.
Wow. You just broke the story barometer on this show.
I think.
Did you ever see him again?
When you're marketing it, just do a clip of that story. Let's just start it with.
Thank you.
Simmons, yeah.
You gave me more than one clip. Okay. Did you ever hear from him again?
That was it. Yeah, that was it.
That's good enough.
I know. Julie always teases me. She's like, why couldn't it have been me? I would have taken one for the team.
Wow, you and Julie with back-to-back confessions about sex and stuff on my show. I like it. You're outdoing the boys. Okay.
I bet we could too.
This has been going for a while, but we got to talk about Queens of the Stone Age. I want to know how you found them.
All right, so Monster Mag was a huge hit, and then the whole Seagram's thing happened where they were merging Geffen, A&M, Interscope into one thing, But basically, you know what it was? It was that it was going to be Interscope, and like it was the end of A&M and Geffen. And
Yeah.
it wasn't how they presented it in the beginning, but ultimately that was the reality of it. And very, it was Black Thursday, right? So many people lost their jobs that day, and I had Monster Magnet under my belt, and I had a very Tom Wally and I just got on so
Tom's a good
well.
guy.
We got on so well. And I think he realized that like he could trust me. Because Tom said to me, listen, you're in New York, you're an island. He said, I don't stay on top of people. He said, but when you run into a problem, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to tell you how to solve it. And you'll either listen to what I say or you'll hang yourself. Ringtone.
That is your ringtone.
He said, you'll either hang yourself, you'll either fly or you'll hang yourself. And I flew with Tom Wally. So I brought Queens of the Stone Age in. I'd seen oh my God, what a story. I was at South by Southwest. I knew Josh. Catherine Ennie brought Josh to me because of Monster Magnet. And we just really liked each other. And I knew Caius, and Josh was just smart and handsome and great and charming and funny. And Catherine said, he's putting together a new band. And I said, all right, just let me know what it is and I'll follow it and I'll see you and let's go. So they invited me to South by Southwest. It was the first Queens of the Stone Age show. They didn't have a bass player. He didn't know how to sing. They pulled Nick Oliveri off the street from the Dwarves, off the street, and said, would you play this show tonight? Steev, it was so bad. It was terrible. But there was some magic in there, like you could just tell. You could just tell. So I think a lot of A&R people walked away going, no fucking way. Like, I'm not, that's a train wreck. But I didn't. I said, just keep inviting me to shows. Keep letting me know what's going on. And they did. And then they made that EP, and K-Rock picked it up. And I was the first person that they called. So I went to see them. They were playing in New York at the Mercury Lounge. And they were like Zeppelin that night. Like, they were just like so majestic. You know how that band could just be majestic?
Yeah.
Like, they were that night. And I was just, I have to sign him. And Tom was just cool. He was like, yeah, let's go. They have an EP. It's being played on K-Rock. They were on Stone Gossard's label, Loose Groove. And he was a real pain in the ass to make a deal with.
Stone was?
Yeah, he really was. And that deal, like, he wasn't going to let him go. And Josh really wanted to be on Interscope. He really wanted to be on Interscope. And there was a funny moment, where like they were playing Wetlands and there was a hurricane. And there was a hurricane that night. And Columbia was also coming to see them. And I was there and I had a Queen's baby tee on and, my Doc Martens, whatever, and probably like leather pants or whatever, because I wore leather pants all the time. And all these Columbia people come marching in backstage and they're wearing suits. And so I'm backstage and there's like 12 reps from Columbia backstage. And Catherine Ennie told me that Josh and Nick walked up to her and said, look at Debbie over there. She's so cool. And look at these assholes over here. Where do you think we'd want to be? And it was so nice, It was so nice. It was so like, yeah, like they wanted to be with you. You could choose to be with the machine, and Interscope was a machine. But maybe you want to work with somebody who really understands you, really understands.
That is great.
On the other hand, that can be off-putting because the Strokes hated that about me. Like, I showed up I took them out to dinner somewhere in Chicago or something, and I had Nick Oliveri had a side band called Cocaine Rodeo, and I was wearing a Cocaine Rodeo t-shirt, and they just hated me. They just didn't like that I was like that person. They maybe wanted the suits, and that, you know what, that's okay. Everybody makes decisions based on whatever, right? And that band definitely made the right decision for who they were. But yeah, so I ended up signing Queens of the Stone Age. We got Stone to finally agree to something, and we made it rated R. And that was probably the most beautiful record making experience that I've ever had. We were at Sound Studio, like, what a magical place.
Yeah.
Trina Shoemaker was the engineer. Chris Goss was the producer.
Wow. I
Atlantic
forgot about that. Chris from Masters of Reality. That's right. He produced that. Yeah.
produced that.
Did you hook that up?
I think that was a Josh thing, because they were, Kaius and
Kai. Yeah, yeah. The
all that.
Stoner Rock crew.
But I think Trina was probably my thing. I don't know that she had that great an experience making that record, but I did, and she was the right person, because we wanted these warm, because there's no digital sound on that record. That record is all analog. We cut tape. There's
Thank
no
you.
Pro Tools.
I want to thank you for doing that right now publicly. Thank you. Fuck digital. I want all 2-inch tape.
Yeah. And so it has that warm, beautiful, like old, like people would hear it and they go like, it sounds like a record from the 70s, because we made it like a record from the 70s, and it was, oh God, it was just beautiful being there. And they were so creative and just wonderful. And then Tom Wally left. Tom Wally left Interscope. And then it became Jordan Schur, and it became
With A-OK? With you in the band?
no, things got horrible. Things got really horrible.
Well,
This
how late? Well, how late in the game is this? Because I left A&M in '97, so you stuck. You had a job in the industry for a while, a lot longer than that. What,
no,
2000?
2004. I was laid off in 2004.
You must have been one of the only people left, man. Jesus.
Well, that was really when it was all starting to happen. Like, that was the year. That was the year that everything fell apart. So yeah, so Tom Wally left after Rated R, and we did have we had like Lost Art of Keeping a Secret got played on radio, and the band toured, and the band got incredible press, and we got lots of like
They
record
blew up.
here and stuff like that, and they were just so great live. And then oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. Maybe that's a good thing. Tom left, and he was replaced by Mark. Oh my God, what's his name?
Barner.
No, he was like a guy from Georgia. He was an REM guy. He was
Mitch Easter.
Smashing Pumpkins, A&R.
Sorry, I'm not being very helpful right now
No.
because I forget people's names all the time. It's
It's really funny that I can't remember his name, because like he's the only person that I hate. Like, he's the only person in my life that I actually
good. I don't have to edit this part. I'll believe
I hate. Yeah, and I can't remember his last
the
name.
only person that you hate.
I hate him. I
Well,
do.
good. You're doing a good job if you don't remember his last name, because you don't want to remember the people you hate.
That's true, right? Then maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. But yeah, he came, and he was not like Tom. Like, Tom was like, "You're an island, and I'm gonna let you fly, and I'm gonna let you do your thing, and I'm gonna give you, if you have a problem, you listen to me, and if you don't, maybe you're gonna run into problems, but you do, and you're just gonna keep flying." And before Tom left, he was like, "You're so great, Debbie. You've got great taste, and you've got great instincts, and you make great records. And thank you, David Anderley." And he said, you need to keep doing this. And he said, and then start your own label. Like, that was his advice to me. And that never happened. But
I got to know Tom Wally because I was at Enigma. I worked with Poison. That was my big famous band. And, we had the Smithereens and Stryper. So we went to them, Capitol, and we gave those, those were the three bands that Capitol said, this is the deal. And that's when we made the deal. And Tom Wally was always such a great guy. He had nice hair. He was
We
really
used
good.
to call him the silver fox.
Yeah, he had
He
really
walks
good
in
hair.
and the hair is just
He
flowing.
Every time, whoops, sorry, I just knocked my mic over. Every time I ever ran into him, and that was in 1986, every time I ever saw him after that, he shook my hand. And I didn't really get to know him, but he was that kind of guy.
He's
He
that
was a nice guy.
yeah.
So I know what you mean. So how do you get someone to replace him that could be that nice? You worked for Anderley and Tom Wally. That's pretty good.
I know. And I think like Tom also did a really good job of kind of protecting me from Jimmy Iovine, who's like a little crazy. Um, so anyway, this Mark guy came in and he was the head of A&R. And I had gotten into a bidding war situation with him over Ryan Adams, and Americana artist. So I really found Ryan at South by Southwest. Like I was the first A&R person on it, and
There was a big buzz on him at the beginning. I remember that.
and he was beautiful. He was drunk and his guitar was falling off, but he had this voice and he had this vibe and he had these songs. And I was like, oh, Brian Long actually took me and Brian looked at me and he said, "You're going to sign him, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes," like in that moment. But Mark and he and these Smashing Pumpkins people been given a boutique record label that Ryan ended up signing to. But I gave them a run for their money. You know, me and Anderley and Cafaro, we gave them a run for their money. And I think that this guy didn't like me because of that. And he did some things that were really nasty.
Mm.
Ryan Adams became very good friends with Jesse and Danny from Degeneration. He actually produced a record of theirs that didn't end up coming out, but because I introduced them, of course, like, and Ryan was dating my assistant. He would stay at my apartment when he didn't have a place to stay. He'd sleep on my couch. He watched my cats when I was out of town if he was in New York, and dated my assistant, who he wrote many songs about. And became very good friends with Jesse and Danny. And Mark called me up. I was getting on a plane. I remember this. And he said to me, "Do you really think that Jesse and Danny are the kind of people that Ryan should be hanging out with?"
Oh.
And I was like, "No, I guess you'd really prefer that he was hanging out with the Geraldine Fibbers. Well, you go make that happen." You know,
Wow,
like,
that was pretty lame. Who is he to
horrible.
like say that?
Yeah, horrible, horrible. Like,
Because every musician's a saint. I mean, it's like,
well, again, I think he just didn't think it wasn't his cup of tea musically. Like he obviously was never a Kiss fan, but
I'm glad you didn't remember this guy's last name because I don't want to know who it is now. But because I hope I never knew him or was
well,
friends with him or
I'll
whatever.
probably think of it, but I won't say it, and I'll just tell it to you later. But the people who know, they'll know who I'm talking about. So anyway, he really made my life miserable. But what he wanted to A&R Queen for the Stone Age. That's what he wanted. He wanted to A&R,
He
and
wanted to bump you out of the
he
way.
wanted to bump me out of the way. And he said, when he came in, he said, it's the most. He called me up. He said, "It's the most important signing of the last 5 years. Queens of the Stone Age is the most important signing of the last 5 years. And if I'd had a job when they were on the market, I would have signed them."
Well, he said some really weird shit to you, man. Fuck. So what did you do finally? Did you just have enough of this guy and say fuck this and
No, no,
split?
no. I held on, but he kept chipping away at my power, and he kept chipping away at my power, and he kept chipping away at my power, and I was no longer an island. And I really think that guy, like, if he could have said, "You have to copy me on all the emails you send out," like, I think he was like that close to, like, he just was a control freak. So he set me up. He set me up with Josh and their managers, and we were mixing songs for the deaf, and he got me fired. He got me fired off the project, not from Interscope, off the project. He just set Josh and I up against each other.
Oh,
I
that
kind of walked
sucks.
into it. And Jimmy had a lot to do with that too. Jimmy liked when people went neck and neck.
Iovini?
Yeah, I mean, he liked that. He liked like
Sorry, I really turned him into he is Italian though, I think. How can you turn an Italian into an Italian? Whatever. You know I'm talking about, the right guy.
he liked that kind of cage fighting mentality
So that
thing.
was kind of a boys' club, huh?
Oh yeah. Actually, I had a friend, Gary Harris. He passed away. He was an urban guy. He signed D'Angelo, um, and he said, he said, Debbie, you didn't even realize it, but you were at Interscope during the height of sexism. He was like, you were at Interscope at the most sexist Shark Tank stage of Interscope. And he's like, and you didn't even realize it. And maybe I didn't, but I did realize what was happening in my life, and what was happening in my life wasn't good. And I emotionally started to unravel because it was so intense. It was so intense. I had Jordan Schur, the Limp Bizkit guy, threatening to take Monster Magnet away. I had Mark.
Wait a minute, you worked with Fred too?
I didn't, no, but Jordan Schur, who signed Limp Bizkit, he wanted to
Worst
take
band in
Monster.
history of music. I can say that. It's my podcast. Actually, Night Bob was on my show recently. It hasn't come out yet. And Night Bob called them the worst band too. And I was like, we have a lot in common, man.
Yeah. Um,
The end of the 90s was horrible. You had, oh my God, it just got so bad with new music. It just killed me. I could not take those bands.
Well, then, so I still was, before that happened, before all that happened with Queens of the Stone Age. And then, of course, Songs for the, he wanted to put his name before mine on Songs for the Deaf. And I called him up and I said, you have got to be kidding me. I signed this band.
Under A&R, he wanted to put his name ahead of yours?
Yep. I was like, I signed this band. And people knew, like, people said to me, his name doesn't even belong on it.
What
Like,
a
people
creep
knew.
this guy was.
Other A&R people would say, Debbie, we know what happened to you.
What the fuck? I never heard about any of this. I'm sorry you went through all that, man.
Yeah, it really
Jesus.
sucked. I don't really talk about it a lot, but it was hard. Those
It
years
sounds worse than being in a bug-infested, heatless office in Rockville Center to me.
There's the physically challenging, and then there's the emotionally challenging, right? So I lived both.
Tell me about how it ended.
Yes. So I don't know. I met this guy Asif Ahmed. He was their manager. He loved me. He would just come up and hang out at the office. He was friends with my assistant, different assistant than dated Ryan Adams now.
You're funny.
And he just knew. He said, I saw this band last night. I'm gonna manage them. You're gonna sign them. And I said, okay, let's go. So he invited me to see them at Brownies. And Karen O was just terrific. She was amazing. She spit. She was just great. She was so cool. They put out their own EP, and then that got great. Or a single, I can't remember.
That EP was great. The first EP was fantastic.
And that got lots of press. And of course, she had Christian Joy, her designer, and she would do like these amazing outfits. And
I was imagining you and her together. That would be a sight.
Well, it's really funny because I had really short pixie cut dark hair, and she had that really short dark hair.
Yeah.
We were both like stick thin at that time, and people would confuse us. Like, I remember being at a festival in Copenhagen with them, and I was at their merch stand, and people thought that I was her. And
can I have your autograph?
People would be like, Karen, and I turn around and they'd be like, oh, you're not Karen, So yeah, that was pretty funny. But she was hard. She was hard. She was so powerful that whatever mood Karen was in dictated the mood that everyone was in. And I remember walking into, like, I think it was the Academy in London, and I could tell she wasn't in a good mood just by like walking into the building. Like she could either like make the mood like a carnival, or she could just suck the air out of the entire building. Like she was powerful, so fantastic. I just love how they keep recreating themselves. I can't wait to see them this summer. They're doing acoustic with a full orchestra. It's going to be extraordinary. Like, she's still doing it. Like, she's still relevant, and I love that. And Josh is still relevant. Josh is just like Queens of the Stone Age are just, I can't wait to hear what the next record is going to be like. Like, I really loved that last record, like that in Roman, whatever it's called, like Emotional Sickness, and oh, so great, great. And the last time I saw them live, Queens of the Stone Age, they just leave you speechless.
Yeah.
And he's lovely, he's lovely. Like, he will just text me and say, I love you. I'm thinking of you. I love you. So as much as we had our moments where it was bad and he had a temper, there was a lot of, there were a lot of drugs, and there was the big tempers and big egos and stuff. And that on my part too. At the end of it all, it's a happy it's a happy story,
We understand the music business, but it's hard to explain it to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Because,
So I'm sorry out there if I'm rambling, but
I mean, what job do you have where everyone in the office knows that you were doing lines all night, or you come in hungover, or you got drunk and made out with the bass player? I mean, it's like,
Simmons.
it's like, it's like, well, can you wrap this whole thing up for me and tell me how you ended it, and when it ended, the music part, and when you decided you wanted to be a school teacher? Because that's what I'm
Well, it's
curious
not
about.
linear, so it's kind of hard, but I'll be as brief as possible because I know we've been talking a long time. Um, uh,
This is 2 episodes, by the way.
okay, all right. You need to edit it though.
Oh, it's going to have to be 2 episodes. I've never talked to anyone this long before.
Oh my God, I'm
I'm
so sorry.
transfixed by you, Debbie. I can't
Oh,
help it.
I'm so sorry. But I guess not enough people have asked me my story, so I'm enjoying like reliving it. Um, So 2004, and people are just losing their jobs, and people at Interscope start really losing their jobs because we just didn't Napster and the digital downloads, and we there wasn't the money, and like everything had just gotten so overblown because we were flying business class, and we were staying at the Four Seasons, and we were wining and dining, and we were it was you know
If I was told, I'm sorry I have to interrupt you. If I was told when I had $36,000 on my expense account one year when I was with the marketing department, that, that was a lot, but don't worry. I can only imagine what the A&R department's expense accounts were like. I mean, it's like,
yeah, they were crazy, minimum 75,000.
there you go. See, 36,000 meant nothing to them.
Yeah. So, um, and in that, like, I made some good money. I gotta say, like, I was a woman. I was always underpaid. Men that never had a hit in their life, who had the same job title I did at different labels and stuff, made more money than I did.
That sucks.
Yeah. And there were really only like a few real great money making years in there because of all of that. So, um, that is unfortunate. I feel like, and I also felt like it was going to last forever. I was just living the dream, and it was going to last forever, and it wasn't being realistic.
Did you ever think about management or anything like that?
I I did, and a lot of people asked me to manage, but it's not. Maybe they weren't the right people. And I'm not like an entrepreneur minded person. Like, I need the support of a company. Um,
Right.
and I know that about myself. I wish that I was, because then like I could be partners with Jonathan Daniel or something like that. But I'm not that person. I think he's a rock star, by the way. But anyway, so I don't know. I just that Mark, whose last name I'm
The guy we don't want to remember.
doesn't exist. His last name doesn't exist. He came into my office and let me go, and that was that. That was that. I'm sorry to say, but we have to. Blah blah. And like the week before, I think the head of marketing had been let go.
Was there enough money to last for a while in the package?
Yeah. I mean, I was able to take like a year, and I got a yoga instructor certificate. I gave up my apartment in New York, which was the biggest mistake that I ever made because I had a 1-bedroom on the corner of Christopher and Bleecker that was just
Whoa.
so beautiful and so perfect. And I wish I had that. I wish I'd never given it up, because once you leave New York, you can't get back in. I'm still working to like get myself back into New York.
Sounds like Boston now.
Yeah, I bet any city, right? So I moved up to Longview Farm Studios. I worked there for about a year. I didn't like it. I came back. I couldn't get back into New York.
You were in North Brookfield?
I was, yeah.
Where were you living?
Just down the street from the studio.
Wow, because I'm in Worcester County right now, not very far away from North
It must be
Brookfield.
beautiful. It must be beautiful.
I don't love it.
I didn't like it. Wasn't for, but we were out in the boonies too at Longview. It's like 100 acres of nothing but the studio. So I came back, like lived in Jersey City, lived in Hoboken, lived in Newark, lived in Westchester over the COVID years. And so I went back to, eventually I went back to school. I decided I had to do something. I went back to school. I got my master's in education and started teaching. But then I was having this conversation with this friend of mine that in the beginning of the podcast I said is processing his mortality. I had this conversation with him yesterday. I always believed in doing what you love. Unfortunately, like not enough. I've never been enough about the money. And Josh Homme actually said this to me. He said, "You know what your downfalling was? When it comes to art and commerce, you're too much art." And I am. I really believe in the art of the thing, and I don't pay attention enough to the money. So I'll be all right, but I probably could have been much better.
I
I'll
am
be all right,
exactly like that.
but I
I'm
probably could have been much better.
I'm I I'm all about the art. I'm all
Yeah,
about the art.
yes, obviously you are. You
No,
are.
I mean, yeah, I made some horrible mistakes with money, but when you part, it was a rough, let's leave it at this. I had a good time.
Yeah, no, and I could say the same. Like maybe too much of a good time at times, but yeah, I lived hard and I lived wild and I partied like a rock star and I had like great life. Like I've had a tremendous life. But the teaching thing was a little bit about I lived like a rock star. Maybe I should do something good for society. And a little bit about like I just really love books and I love analyzing books and I love talking about books and I dig teenagers. I made records for teenagers, so like I'll combine those things. It's
I
not.
could tell that you're a good teacher. Like I told you when we started this whole thing off, you just got a great vibe to be in front of a class of kids.
Oh, thank you. It's fun, and so there's times when I think about going back to the business. When Jesse Malin sold out those 2 shows at the Beacon Theater, and I had this experience where I came walking down the stairs the first night, and Mike Schnapp and a bunch of other people were standing.
Michael Schnapp?
Yeah,
I haven't heard that name in years.
He's around. We're standing in the lobby, and they saw me, and they all started applauding, and I was like, wow,
That's
wow.
cool.
Yeah, like wow. So I thought like, oh, maybe I should put myself back on the market. But I'm 61, so I'm so aged out of this whole thing.
It doesn't matter. I think when people see this and they hear you talk, There's going to be a lot of people calling you for interviews.
Aw, thank you. Well, it doesn't matter. So,
And
I,
I can say I got the, sorry. And I was going to say I got the Gene Simmons story before anyone else. So I just want to.
you did. You did. You got an exclusive. There you go. So that really is a good story. Also, Paul Stanley called me when I was 13 years old. Like, I used to write him letters and I sent them to Allcoin Management and he got them. So they were in the studio recording Love Gun, I think, and he called me in the 70s, like whatever, 1977, person to person call from Paul Stanley to Debbie Southwood-Smith. My parents called me down, like somebody's on the phone for, hey, Debbie, it's Paul Stanley. I knew it wasn't one of my friends because he had that deep Queen's voice, and I started screaming. I think I just screamed for like 7 minutes, like the poor guy. But Gene growled in the background and stuff. So yeah, so big, a lot of kiss, a lot of
You
kiss.
were made for rock and roll. There you go. That's it right there. That's the story right there.
See, it's only rock and roll, but I like it. So I live for it. I really do. So yeah, so sometimes I would think like maybe I was off for a couple weeks around that time that Jesse played those shows because I had shoulder surgery. And I said, let me change my LinkedIn status. Let me see. Let me take a look at what's out there, blah, 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 blah. There was actually an interesting job. It was for catalog. It was an A&R person for catalog, which is really what most of my contacts are doing at this point. The managers and stuff I dealt with are dealing with like catalogs. So that would have been good. But then I went back after being out for a couple weeks, and those kids just make me laugh, Steev. Like they do. They just make me laugh. They can aggravate the fuck out of me too, but they generally bring me so much joy. So yeah, here I am. But I get to, I go see music all the time. So I Ace
You
Frehley
do.
on Friday. I saw Nick Cave last weekend. It's always, there's always stuff going on.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me,
I'm
Steve.
sorry I got overly excited a few times and started talking when you were talking, and I could relate to so many of the things that you were saying that I just couldn't control myself at
Oh
times.
no, don't apologize. And I love that we both gesticulate all over the place. We're both with our hands everywhere and getting excited and knocking things over like ah. It was a pleasure, Steve. Like when you turn this off, I want to hear a little bit more about what's going on with you. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.